Happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather. We continue to track large Hurricane Ernesto, which is bearing down on Bermuda here in the next day. But we have a look at what's coming up in the tropics with a bit of a lull after that I don't want you to fall asleep on. Just kind of take it with a grain of salt, but likely to see a much more active pattern as we head towards the heart of hurricane season at the very end of August and especially into the month of September. So we're going to talk about Ernesto, and we're also going to talk about the tropics set to explode soon. You can see Ernesto on the map here, moving close to Bermuda here tomorrow around this time, and then eventually getting kicked out to sea, maybe clipping Atlantic Canada. After that, we are going to watch potentially a weaker system coming off of the African coastline, but taking a further north track, which is not one that'll be favorable. After that, we should start to begin a much more active stretch of weather at the very end of August and heading into the beginning of September. And these are the waves we need to be watching in the Caribbean as well as in the United States as we head towards Labor Day and beyond. So I'm going to talk about that in the second part of this video. Let's take a look first at the current setup here. This is large Hurricane Ernesto, a lot of cloud cover being strewn to the north and east with a strong jet stream. You can see the clouds from Ernesto are actually winding up all the way in Ireland here this morning. Just a very kind of extreme amount of wind speed aloft here. And so fortunately, Ernesto is not really strengthening anymore. It is up to Category 2 strength for the time being. Being accelerated northeast by this trough that's spinning over Nova Scotia. After that leaves, there'll be a bit of a pause where the system comes back to the north, and then the next trough here in the Great Lakes will pick it up and kick it away for good. And that should accelerate and affect portions of northwestern Europe by Wednesday and Thursday of next week. Quiet across the Gulf and Caribbean, nothing expected to form in here. We do have a weak system here and a weak system here, both in unfavorable spots. This wave here, unlikely to develop, but we'll keep an eye on it. Should bring some heavy rain here into the Caribbean islands early next week. And you can see things are very stable here with a large region of high pressure in place across the eastern Atlantic and a lot of Saharan dust as well, still moving off the African coastline. So you're thinking, okay, well, we're 5 storms into what's supposed to be close to a record season. What gives? Well, we are going to be seeing that change coming here as the switch gets flipped here at the very end of the month of August. And I think we're going to be well above average by the end of September and beyond into October and November. Here is a closer look at Ernesto, and you can see a few things on the screen. Number one, some dry air still filtering into the western side here. We've had a bit of wind shear, which fortunately has kept Ernesto at bay. Not likely to become a major hurricane, but still a powerful storm as it will be moving over Bermuda at a slower rate here later tonight into tomorrow. That track kind of heading in this direction. Bermuda is right here. But another thing I wanted to point out, and you already know this if you live in eastern Canada and the Northeast, but it's extremely smoky here. We've had wildfire smoke get carried across by these troughs through Canada into portions of New England and the Northeast. That is going to intersect with Ernesto up in here, but Ernesto is a big enough system where the smoke is not going to do much to do anything. It'll pretty much get stopped when it hits the moisture environment that Ernesto is moving into. So unfortunately, we can't use the wildfires as a weapon against our storm here. It just doesn't work out that way. If you're in Bermuda, you may have remembered in 2020, Hurricane Paulette had a similar setup. That was later in the summer, actually towards the fall in September. So here's a closer look here, and you can see it looks like there's an eye in the center, but this is really just dry air circling into the core here, keeping the system from strengthening too much more. But nonetheless, we have some very heavy rain bands on the northern and eastern side of the storm. This is Bermuda right here. And so we are going to see these rain bands moving in this evening and continuing to pick up in intensity later in the night tonight. Unfortunately, the track of the storm does not bring it by east of Bermuda. That would be the most favored track to keep the worst away. The worst part of the storm is going to be moving right across the island here late tonight and into the day tomorrow. Here's also a look at the visible image to show you kind of the same thing here. While the storm is limited on the southwestern side due to wind shear and dry air, it does still have a pretty well-defined center. And this is Bermuda here, and the storm is heading in this direction. We'll start to bend away back to the left, but after leaving Bermuda here tomorrow. Aircraft have been flying through the system, and the main thing that sticks out to me is that the size of the wind field has grown significantly on the eastern side. Bermuda's up and about here, so it's just off the map. Pressures have not dropped any further. They're staying around 970 millibars, so it is a Category 2 hurricane it would need to drop down below 960 or even lower to get to Category 3, and that is looking a lot less likely than it did a couple days ago. Reason being, the wind shear was a little bit under forecast, as has been somewhat of the dry air on the left side of the system, but still, it is a system that's grown. This was yesterday's flight at this time, and this is today's, and you can see a much bigger wind field with stronger winds. So even though it's only gone up a category, it is still one that we need to be watching. I'll come back to this, but here is a look from Zoom Earth at our hurricane forecast. Category 2 storm. The Hurricane Center has it weakening slightly down to Category 1 as it approaches Bermuda. I don't know necessarily if it's going to happen that way. I would prepare for Category 2, but I'll be rooting on a Category 1 for those of you in Bermuda, with the nearest approach coming around 7 to 8 in the morning. After that, the system will make a bend to the left and then bend back to the right as it interacts with troughs. It will increase its forward speed, and by the end of the weekend, we'll be moving close to Sable Island here off of Nova Scotia, and may come very close to Cape Race, Newfoundland, sometime on Monday afternoon and Monday night. This could still impact St. John's and St. Pierre. It could move over Cape Race, or it could also make a harder turn to the right and just narrowly avoid a second landfall here as it moves away. By the time we get to the middle of next week, post-tropical system, and you can see it will probably take aim at Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and perhaps even Iceland up to the north here, and the Faroe Islands as a powerful non-tropical system by the middle of next week. And if you look at the European model, you'll see that is modeled here. The system is moving towards Atlantic Canada on Monday morning, but making a hard right bend. The Euro takes the center just south of Cape Race Monday night, and then moves away from Newfoundland quickly in the day on Tuesday. And by Wednesday, it merges with a bigger storm system, which could produce some snow over parts of Greenland, but at that point, non-tropical. And the pressure does come up somewhat, yielding to this bigger system. So indirect impacts coming for the British Isles Wednesday night and Thursday, but not a direct hit from a powerful system, fortunately. Here's a look at the model tracks, and you can see things are still pretty quiet for the time being across Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia anyway. What am I saying? Quiet. Things are in agreement. Okay, please forgive me, I slipped up there. Things are in agreement, and other than one or two models taking this over Newfoundland, the majority just keep it to the south and east, and good confidence that this will swing quickly to the east and move across the North Atlantic on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Here's the ship's intensity forecast. Category 2, but weakening slightly. And the main reason is that we've got relative humidity that is below the 60% kind of magical mark, I want to call it. Just too much dry air west of the system to allow it to really organize the core it needs to strengthen. The waters are certainly very warm and remaining up close to 30 degrees Celsius until we get up to this point, which will actually be up in here. So the waters are very warm, but the relative humidity is lower than we like to see for an intensifying system. So we may see some struggle here with the intensity. That's okay, though. We should still have a hurricane up until about Monday, and then the system will move over colder water and into an area with some higher wind shear by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday. Yes, the relative humidity picks up, but the water is a lot colder, so we lose the tropical surface and deeper waters that we need to sustain a larger hurricane. Here's a look at the wind field real quick, and you can see the strongest winds will be, if we're fortunate, just east of Bermuda, if this is correct. You see kind of these flags in here. They indicate the strongest winds, and even though the storm is going to be going very close to the western end of the island, the strongest wind field is expanded to the point where Bermuda could actually miss out on the very worst of this wind. Now, if this comes 30, 40 miles to the west, that will no longer be the case. If it comes farther east, that would be the most ideal, but you can see a large, broad area of strong wind being pushed away by wind shear. And fortunately, if this is correct, the strongest winds are going to remain just to the east of the Bermudan Triangle here as we get to tomorrow. The bad news, though, is that the storm is slowing down its forward speed and moving at its slowest here later in the night tonight. So at least a 12-hour period of intense rain and strong wind over Bermuda here. That will begin during the late afternoon today, just a few hours from when I'm broadcasting, and continue to ramp up tonight. There may be a relative lull, and then things are going to ramp back up behind the system for several more hours, and then things should improve tomorrow evening. And if you look at this here, you'll see that the wind direction completely shifts tomorrow afternoon and evening as Ernesto pulls away, and some of these incredibly strong winds actually hit the island from the north and west. So rather than the east and southeast winds, it switches around, and that's going to push dangerous storm surge onto the island on the northern side, and then push it away from the southern end of the island. This should be moving away here later tomorrow night, and we'll see improvement very quickly by the time we get to Sunday. Most of the storm here is the next 30 hours, and then things quiet down. I'll show you the HMON model as well real quick here. Similar aspects here. We'll see the storm moves away. It actually heads into a more favorable environment where it could try to strengthen a little bit, even in the far northern Atlantic. Remember, those water temperatures are running 5, 6, 7 degrees above average. So this system will stay stronger longer, but it may not get into a spot to re-intensify until well past Bermuda. So we're not writing the storm off, but this is definitely some encouraging news for those of you in Bermuda, where a couple of days ago, the wind shear was not forecast to be quite that strong, and it looked like it would be a lot worse case scenario. Here's a look at the wind field as it moves into Bermuda here tonight, 8, 9 o'clock winds picking up to tropical storm force, and then approaching hurricane force here later this evening and continuing there overnight tonight. Maybe a slight lull, but then we get hit with the backside of the system until later tomorrow around mid-afternoon. And then in the evening, things should slowly, gradually die off. Then we watch the winds moving on to Sable Island here on Monday morning. Not super windy on Nova Scotia proper, but as we get to southeastern Newfoundland, those winds do ramp up Monday afternoon and especially Monday night. Here's the European wind field forecast for Bermuda. Wind gusts to 40 miles per hour in Hamilton around 6, 7 o'clock tonight, then 50 miles per hour around 9 o'clock, 60 miles per hour 2 hours later, 70 miles per hour around midnight in Bermuda. Stronger winds on the western side of the island than in Hamilton. As we get to the overnight, we will see the strongest winds moving over the western side of the island. Hurricane force winds expected for the entire island. And then we see a bit of a lull, and then we get the backside here with winds that will continue to ramp up in the morning tomorrow. So it's interesting how the wind field plays out here. We get a really nasty burst here later tonight. It may look like it's dying off around daybreak, but it ramps right back up here in the morning. And then after the storm pulls away, we see the winds switch around to more westerly. And then finally, they die down as we get towards the evening below 40 miles per hour. We're going to get a lot of rain here as well. Locally, 8 to 12 inches of rain. Highest amounts expected on the western side of the island. Again, that depends exactly on where our storm system goes. And then across Atlantic Canada, we don't see too much rain for Nova Scotia. In fact, most of your rain comes from the trough that's swinging through, not from Ernesto itself. But offshore, we could see amounts of 40 to 60 millimeters, and some of those could make their way onto Cape Race here, including St. John's, as we get into Monday night and Tuesday. Here's a look at those wind gusts as they come on shore as well across Newfoundland, getting a little bit breezy here on Monday morning, and then much windier by Monday afternoon. 30 to 60 kilometer per hour wind gusts, increasing here quickly to as much as 80 to 90 kilometers per hour, and then winds die off as the storm pulls away in the morning on Tuesday. Looking farther off, we have to take a look at things here in the UK. I don't think we're going to see quite as much wind damage here, but winds do ramp up quickly with this strong westerly jet screaming into Ireland here. We're looking at 40 to 60 kilometer per hour wind gusts, but as much as 80 to 100 once we get into northwestern portions of Wales and southwestern portions of Scotland. The water's going to get pushed very quickly into this area here and onto the west coast of the UK, and then the system moves away and we get back to a more typical pattern. Rain amounts over 48 hours may exceed 50 to 60 millimeters here across portions of Scotland. Lesser amounts where the strong winds are battering Wales and southern Ireland. Northern Ireland, though, could see some heavy rainfall as well. So that is a look at things here. Let's move along and take a look at what's coming up in the tropics, and you will see a lot of Saharan dust still coming off. That's not uncommon for this time of the year, but it's keeping things at bay here next week over the Caribbean and over the tropical Atlantic. It may let up a little bit. We may see something weak try to sneak in here later next week, but then we see another push of very dry air. So we still have some time between now and maybe a couple weeks from now where things are not going to be super active for the time being. We also see wildfire smoke here over the northern Atlantic and parts of Canada. That's not going to get too much involved, but take a look here as we get to next Tuesday, and all the smoke coming from the fires in Western Canada makes it across to south and west of Europe and all the way into the Canaries here. So that is not exactly a great sign if you want to look for hurricanes to form. This is more stable air, but it will come to an end and we will see more favorable weather towards the end of the month. As we head into September, take a look at how much wetter things are going to get here in the Gulf and Caribbean and across the main development region. And October stays very wet across this area, and even November. So we are still just kind of early on in this season, about 15% of the way through, even though I know it's the middle of August. But as we get to September and October, our longer term models are showing quite a bit of action here. It's very difficult to say where exactly, but this is showing a very wet pattern here with respect to average as La Nina continues to slowly take over. And even December could be very wet across the Caribbean. This is not saying we're going to have a storm, but the rains will certainly be a potential problem here. As we take a look at what's coming in off of Africa here, let's look back here just a little bit. You can see any wave that comes across here in the next week doesn't have much of a chance of surviving. It'll run into South America. Here's another feature, though, to keep an eye on towards the middle of next week near the Cape Verdes. And you can see not a lot of support, but maybe something tries to sneak up here north and east of the islands by the weekend. Beyond that, things do start ramping up, and we start to see much more wave activity. Finally, the Saharan dust gets out of our way. And if something forms earlier on, it may avoid the islands and head in this direction. There's a chance, though, if it takes longer to develop, we've got to watch things by the end of the month here moving towards the Caribbean. You can see that as well here as we move west. Pretty quiet in the Gulf, nothing to really stress about for the time being. The waters are heating up, though. We do need to worry about that down the road. But maybe a wave heading into Central America towards the end of next weekend. Maybe some development in the Gulf, potentially. It's going to take a lot to get it to happen, but maybe something the following week. But more likely, we're watching a longer track system that's coming across here and perhaps affecting portions of the Caribbean. If you look at the European control, again, don't get too caught up in this, but you can see weak system here towards the middle and second part of next week. Not really a threat, though, at that point. Beyond that, though, the following week, we may have development closer to the Caribbean and even something showing up behind it. This was the run from yesterday. The run today, at least earlier today, shows a more hyper-type system here to keep an eye on. This is in a similar spot to where Ernesto was here by the 30th and 31st. Again, this is 2 weeks away. I'm showing this to you, but I put a caution label on it. It will likely change. But nonetheless, we are watching the signal for more development here at the end of the month and systems coming in behind it after that. So that's all we have to talk about here in the Atlantic. I do want to show you, though, that the wind shear, which is high right now, is going to lessen. And we're in much favorable, even than average, conditions here for development across the main development region around the second week of September and beyond. This is very favorable here with multiple potential waves coming through in an area of lower than average wind shear right during the heart of hurricane season. So it could be all systems go. Finally, in the Pacific, a very strong typhoon Ampil has made the bend away from Japan. What a close call we had, but fortunately that is moving away. It also has struggled with some dry air. The only reason I'm showing this to you here is that a recurving typhoon like this could have longer-term impacts in a couple of weeks across North America. This will increase the amplification of the jet stream. It'll lead to more active potential severe weather across the northern and central United States. It'll also lead to more dips and more troughs and more rises as well. So we may see heat amplified, and then we may see more significant cold with respect to what we're used to. So that's going to put a kink in things here. We're obviously going to have to talk about that more in the future. Thank you so much for your time today. If you did enjoy my video, please consider becoming a subscriber. I try to do a daily video around lunchtime. That can change a bit towards the weekend depending on my schedule. But as always, I appreciate your time, and I do welcome you to my community today. And as always, I give all the honor and glory to God and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me this calling, who has spoken to me, and who gives me joy in my life and the opportunity to bless other folks through this ministry. Yes, I'm a meteorologist, but I'm also a Christian, and that's what comes first, is my belief and the walk that I have with God, and being a light to other people. John 8:12 says, "Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." And that is very encouraging, because this is a dark world, but I have the opportunity to add some lightness to it, to bring some hope. And Jesus brought us all hope when he rose from the dead, when he was resurrected. And those who have followed him have the hope of eternal life. Those who don't still have the opportunity to make that change. but you don't know when your last day on earth will be. All I know is I would rather follow the light than the darkness, even though there is a ton of darkness out there. And I also want to pray for those of you that are struggling in that darkness, because I think we all have struggles and we all need help from above. We can't do it ourselves, but we can encourage one another to stay faithful. And there is that hope and there is that light that is shining at the end of the tunnel. I hope you all have a blessed end of the week. Be safe in Bermuda, and I will talk to you again soon. God bless you.